All right, Dan, let's talk about Stephen Covey.
Okay.
So when I started in sales, there was a short reading list I was given. Covey was number one on the list, and it was a very common book in the early mid 90s for people to read, and still to this day to some extent. But he talked about, hey, anything you can do, anything relative to the sales side and people interactions falls into one of three buckets: pot one, pot two, pot three. Pot one are things you control. Pot two, things you influence. Pot three are things you don't influence, nor do you control. And what he tries to share through is so many people spend so much time on pot three, both times worrying about, thinking about, wanting to alter, but they have no control or influence over. And the things they do control and influence, they aren't spending the time on. So very easy example here in our world with a calling force. Our people control picking up the phone and dialing it. Number one aspect of what pot one thing that we control. We don't control if the phone gets answered. We don't control other aspects to it, but we control the dial. Can you talk about salespeople and their tendencies to spend too much time in pot three and maybe ways to shift?
This is a really interesting topic to me. First of all, as salespeople, we are hired to sell. That is our job. Second, we are paid when we make sales. If we don't make sales, we're going to be gone. We're not going to be working. And so we get all nervous about, am I going to get a sale? Is this buyer going to buy? Is this prospect going to close? And we worry about all of that, but we can't control that. I cannot dictate whether someone buys or not. What I can do is make sure I'm doing the behavior necessary to make the sale, and also making sure that my technique and my mental capacity and all that stuff are at the top of their game.
Yep.
So if a salesperson is not making sales the way they should be, we have to go back and go, are they doing all the behaviors they should be? If not, there's the starting point. If they are, but they're still not getting the sales, then you need to work on the technique and the mindset. And so at the end of the day, get highly focused on the behaviors you're doing, how many dials, how many conversations. Don't get so focused on the sales, because it will all happen. If you've been around a long enough time, you know, your callers know, if I make 200 dials a day, this is how many appointments I'm going to set, right? We know those numbers. So just keep doing the behavior.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the sales side because we'll have conversations internally. I was talking to somebody about a week ago, and they're like, "Well, I emailed them and I haven't heard back. Should I go ahead and pick up the phone out, call them, send them another note, text them?" And my answer was, you shouldn't do anything.
Mm.
The problem is you're so laser focused on that because your pipeline's not big enough, and you're so caught up in that now you want to push that person through the process. You don't control if he responds. You don't even control if he opened the email in the very first place. So focus on what you control and let those other things kind of play. But too often we want to force, if you will.
That's a really good point. And it's kind of like, okay, before you sent the email, what was your conversation like with them as to when you were going to follow up? Is it in their calendar? Is it in your calendar? And did you have a conversation on what happens if you don't hear back from them? And more than likely, none of those conversations occurred. So there's a teachable moment.
Yes.
So in the future, do that. So you don't have to worry about, oh, what should I do now? Because you will know.
Yep. There we go. All right, buddy. See you again tomorrow.
Take care.